Do you ever feel like you're not as smart as others, or that you just can't seem to get things right? Have you ever experienced moments in life where you felt humiliated or rejected? Do you sometimes struggle with feelings of inadequacy or not being good enough? The story of Saint Joseph of Cupertino offers a profound message of hope and reassurance, revealing that even in our darkest moments, God is truly present and working in our lives. His story is a testament to the extraordinary ways in which God can work through the most unlikely of individuals, and reminds us that God's ways are not our ways, and that He often chooses the most unlikely individuals to accomplish His extraordinary plans. Saint Joseph was born in the year 1603 at Cupertino in the Diocese of Nardo in the Kingdom of Naples. Joseph's childhood was unhappy since his widowed mother considered him a nuisance and treated him severely. He became extremely absent-minded and wandered around town with his mouth open. He was described as the dullest child in the village by one of his teachers. A sudden noise, such as the ringing of a church bell, would make him drop his school books on the floor. He would sit with his companions after school hours and try to talk like them, but every time his conversation would break down. He could not tell a story to the end, no matter how he tried. His very sentences would stop in the middle because he could not find the right words. No one wanted to be his friend. Even his mom was ashamed of him and gave him lots of grief. This made him an object of fun for his school friends and neighbors. He knew that he was not clever, and that he was clumsy, bad-tempered, and had trouble relating to other people. Joseph had a very strong faith. He was very humble and accepted all his suffering as the will of God. His pious qualities went unnoticed by his family and the people who lived in Cupertino because he appeared to be incompetent and forgetful. When he could not succeed in school, his mother did everything she could to find a trade for him. Apprenticed to several different tradesmen, he seemed disinterested, incapable, or as if his mind were constantly wandering. Each craftsman dismissed Joseph after only weeks on the job. Called to holiness from a young age, he was drawn to prayer and heaven, but failed to please anyone who could help him make his way in the world. A debilitating episode of ulcers in his childhood was miraculously healed after a hermit anointed him with oil from a lamp burning in honor of Our Lady of Grace. One day something happened that changed Saint Joseph of Cupertino's life. A friar came into the village begging for bread. Saint Joseph thought to himself, "I might be horrible at everything, but surely I am good at begging for bread." So he decided to become a Franciscan, but was denied entry because of his difficulties in school. So he joined the Capuchins, another religious order. But 8 months later, they sent him away because he could not seem to do anything right. He dropped piles of dishes and kept forgetting to do what he was told. They proclaimed him too difficult to teach, complaining that he was given to fits of piety that were distracting and problematic in community life. Joseph sadly returned home. He looked like a failure to his family and friends. Believing that Joseph had brought disgrace upon her family, his mother was so embarrassed by his failures that she convinced his brother, who was a Franciscan monk, to keep him as a servant for the Franciscans in Gratella, Italy. He was taken in and his job was to take care of the donkeys and other animals, and cleaning out the stables, one of the lowliest jobs. Joseph became known as Brother Ass to the friars. If he were annoyed by the moniker, he did not show it. He began to use it in reference to himself and called himself Brother Ass for the rest of his life. Joseph spent his time in the stables, caring for the animals, shoveling hay and manure, and tending to other menial duties. About this time, Joseph began to change. He grew more humble and gentle, more careful and successful at his work. He had time to unite his heart to God in prayer, growing in virtue and humility while learning things directly from God. He also began a life of penance that seemed to bring him great joy and peace. The consistent work and community life seemed to suit Joseph, and he became more trustworthy and capable. He had a certain humility and sweetness and was diligent in his prayer and devotional life. The friars noticed a change in Joseph over time. Within a few years, he was accepted as a full brother in the community, impressed by his gentleness, simplicity, and humility. They agreed to admit him to priestly studies after a visit from their bishop, who saw in Joseph the heart of a mystic. Though he struggled with his studies and had nothing to offer in the way of eloquence, by God's miraculous intervention, Joseph completed his studies. He became deacon first and then was ordained as a priest in 1628. As he progressed, one thing became clear, that what were being previously thought to be mental lapses and intellectual inferiority were actually mystical experiences occurring since his childhood. During the oral examination for the diaconate, the bishop asked Joseph to answer the one question on the only biblical text Joseph knew by heart and that he loved to expound upon. He was asked randomly by the bishop to elaborate on "Blessed is the womb that bore thee." Joseph's response was profound, and he was able to expound on it with success. A year later came the tests for the priesthood. All the postulants except Joseph were very well prepared. The bishop called on a number of the smart candidates, who responded superbly. Supposing that all were at the same intellectual level, the bishop approved all of them without questioning the rest. Joseph was among the candidates who were asked nothing. After his ordination, Joseph's life came in tune with the divine in a new and radical way. His life as a priest was a long succession of visions and other heavenly favors. After his ordination, it is claimed that he began to levitate while saying the Mass or while reciting the prayers of the Church. He frequently fell into contemplative ecstasy and could not be awakened even with pinches or blows. He would be so deep in prayer that his body could ascend towards heaven, and he would be seen floating in the air in a kneeling position. He could be moved to an ecstatic state by a holy picture or the mention of the name of God, the Blessed Virgin Mary, or one of the saints. He was friends to animals in a way that surpasses even Saint Francis of Assisi. During Mass or prayer, he would often be lifted from his feet. He was observed levitating more than 70 times. People gathered around the monastery out of curiosity or for entertainment, hoping to catch a glimpse of Saint Joseph. Some of those who witnessed these mystic experiences saw them as a sign of Joseph's great holiness, purity, and humility. But his religious superiors thought that he was being disruptive and became a distraction to both the monastery and to others who came seeking novelty. Some denounced him and accused him of witchcraft. He was not allowed to offer Mass or pray in public, or even to eat his meals with his brothers. They eventually isolated and stopped him from appearing in public, sent away to other friaries for scrutiny, to the Inquisition in Naples, and finally to Rome. He was confined and kept in seclusion. For 35 years, he was made to stay in his room in the monastery, where he had a private chapel. He gave himself up entirely to a life of humiliation, mortification, and obedience. His life was one of uninterrupted union with God. Everything in nature lifted him up to heaven and to the supernatural. He fell ill at the age of 60 and died on September 18, 1663. This holy man spent his last hours in union with God, completely immersed in his love. He is the patron of students preparing for exams, pilots, and aviators. There is great devotion to Saint Joseph of Cupertino among school, college, and university students who request his intercession and intervention when preparing for exams. He looked like a failure to his family and friends, but our loving God had great things stored for him. God does not care how smart you are. To do God's will, one does not need intelligence, but love. With whomsoever proceeds in this way, God disposes of everything to carry out his plans for that soul. For this reason, even before seeking to know a man's talents, one must ask whether he loves God and knows God's plans for himself. Saint Joseph of Cupertino's life reminds us that our value and intelligence are not defined by worldly standards. Rather, it is our faith and openness to God's grace that can lead to extraordinary feats, even in the midst of our perceived weaknesses. Let us take comfort in the knowledge that God's plan for us is perfect, and that He can use even the most unlikely among us to accomplish His extraordinary purposes. Dear Saint Joseph of Cupertino, pray for us.